evening. Good to have you with us on this edition of the Urban Debate. And right now, viewers, we are still discovering the minute details of the new lockdown order. You must have all heard by now that the lockdown has been extended by 2 weeks. Well, in some ways, I believe that's slightly misleading. Yes, there is a lockdown, but to say it's been extended means it is of the same nature that the current lockdown is. But let me tell you something. Lockdown 2.0 and Lockdown 3.0, which is what we will see starting May 4th, for the 2 weeks after that, are going to be very, very different because the government has announced a series of relaxations for almost every zone. But here is what is not allowed at all, irrespective of which part of the country you're living in, irrespective of whether you're in a green zone, orange zone or red zone. Schools will remain shut even for 2 weeks after May 4th. Colleges, tutorials, coaching classes, cinema halls and theatres, clubs, gymnasiums, restaurants, public gatherings, cultural and sporting events, all of these are still banned across the country irrespective of where you are. Apart from this, there are a set of relaxations that have been announced. Now, a lot of it, as far as the green zones are concerned, were already in place. But what I want to begin is with the focus on red zones. In red zones currently, almost no activity is allowed. There is a considerable amount of change. And Aarti is joining me with the details of now what is allowed in a red zone. Aarti, if we look at it, India's biggest metros and top cities, almost every state capital is a red zone. Despite that, there will be some relief coming in.
That's right. Tanvi, just very quickly, before talking specifically about the red zone itself, you were just mentioning a list of activities which are irrespective of the zone, not permitted at all. I just quickly want to add to one important part of that, and that is movement of individuals for all non-essential activities shall remain strictly prohibited between 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. This is a very important part of this MHA order. As you were saying, we're just going through it and trying to pick out the minutest details for all our viewers. So irrespective of the zone, unless you have essential work, you cannot be traveling between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. Now, to come to those red zones specifically, there are activities which are not permitted. I want to start off with the activities, things that do not change at all in the red zones. That is the plying of rickshaws, auto rickshaws, the running of taxis, cab aggregators, intra-district and inter-district plying of buses, barber shops, spas and salons. All of this continues to remain shut. There will be no change in this. So what has changed in these red zone districts? Now, some activities have been allowed, and these are industrial activities. All industrial establishments in urban areas, that is the special economic zones, export-oriental units, industrial estates and township, activity work there can resume. Of course, terms and conditions do apply in terms of the number of people working there and the precautions that they take. Movement of individuals, this is important. Movement of individuals and vehicles is allowed only for these permitted activities with a maximum of 2 people in the vehicle in addition to the driver. When it comes to two-wheelers, there is no pillion driver that is allowed. It's just the rider of the bike. Construction activities in urban areas are allowed. The rider here is that they have been limited to on the construction site itself. The workers have to be staying there. They cannot be brought from outside. And construction of renewable energy projects, that has also been permitted. Now, a lot of you are wondering about shops, essential and non-essential shops. So let me put you guys to ease here, because shops in urban areas for non-essential goods are not allowed in malls, markets and market complexes. However, all standalone, that is single shops, neighborhood shops and shops in residential complexes are permitted to remain open in urban areas without any distinction between essential and non-essential. That I'm sure comes as a huge relief for a number of people. Shops, irrespective of essential or non-essential, are allowed to open in these red zones in non-containment zones, provided they are standalone shops. E-commerce activities in red zones are permitted though only for essential goods. So if you were looking forward to a delivery, perhaps you'll have to hold on to that for a while. You cannot be ordering online unless it is an essential goods. Now, another very, very important relaxation here is private offices. Private offices have been allowed to operate with up to 33% strength as per requirement, with the remaining persons working from home. This is a huge relaxation that has come in. It was not allowed earlier. This particular clause has been put into place. This is also a similar situation also is for government offices, which will also function at a 33% strength. Of course, all these offices which are functioning, all these industrial establishments which are functioning, do have to follow the norms of social distancing. Now, Manrega work, construction work, industrial activities, agricultural activities, animal husbandry, all of this will also continue to function in red zones. The little rider here, Tanvi, is that all what I've just mentioned now is not applicable to the containment zones which are within the red zones.
Oh yes, absolutely. The containment zones will be identified within these red zone districts, which will be smaller localities and neighborhoods where there will be stricter norms, where perhaps we won't see movement of people being allowed at all, shops being open, and that largely will also depend on what the local administration and even the state administration decides. In fact, some of this will also depend on the states and the local authorities. But let's find out, and get your reactions from across the country, various government representatives, various political representatives, top health experts and top economists. Over the next 2 hours, viewers, we are going to analyze this threadbare and bring you information on what this means for you, for your city, for your locality, for your work, and for the country's economy and health status. So let's say good evening to the panelists who are joining me right now. Preeti Menon, spokesperson for the Aam Aadmi Party. Sudesh Sharma, spokesperson for the BJP. Aadil Singh Boparai, national spokesperson for the Congress. Professor N.K. Ganguly, former DG of ICMR. And Professor Santosh Mehrotra, is the professor of economics at Center for Informal Sector and Labour Studies at JNU. But let me first up go across to Mr. Sudesh Verma. Mr. Verma, clearly, while we are going to be looking at 2 more weeks of lockdown, there has been some amount of relaxation that's been given even for the red zones. How do you think this is going to impact people's lives?
You see, this has been done very scientifically, and all the state governments have been taken into confidence. The very fact that 3 zones were created, it was to address the issue that how you are going to have a calibrated lockdown opening, which is going to happen now. Because you see, it's not that all the people who are suffering from corona, they are coming out and getting themselves tested. It's quite possible that many people have got themselves cured, but those who have got into adverse cases, they are the ones who come and get tested. And once they recover, then there it is known that yes, that is an area that it can spread. So the government knows, and it has been told that in red zones, you will all of us will get registered with this PM site, so that you can be told, if you are walking across to or nearer to a corona patient, then you would be told that yes, you have crossed that, so take precaution. So it's a very scientific way of doing it. And you see, now we must understand that we have to maintain social distancing in all the zones. Even when you are walking, then the strength has to be less, because if you go on crowding, then the possibility of a spread is there. And if we do not hear of any cases of corona, then naturally that zone will become green zone. And this is how the country is going to go. And this is the best way possible in the present scenario. There is a political consensus. All the state governments have been consulted on that. There could be differences of, as West Bengal is saying, there are 4, white is 10. But in assessment of and going by the process which has been evolved, and it has been found out there has to be no controversy on that, and we should go by the national consensus. 2 weeks is not a long time. Hopefully after that the entire country will be free from corona, and we'll have devised an antidote through which you can treat corona like any other disease.
Okay, let me go across to Preeti Menon of the Aam Aadmi Party. Preeti Menon, it's interesting how this will be implemented. Delhi, as our national capital, actually has all districts which are red zones. Now, what's the view within the government and the party? Will this be implemented? Will we see opening up of, shops and manufacturing units and industrial units as per the new guidelines, even in Delhi?
I think that the entire opening up of shops, standalone shops or manufacturing units will have to be carefully calibrated. It cannot be a blanket order. It will have to involve the local SDMs. And I think there should be a method created where permissions are given based on identifying whether those social distancing norms are being applied. Having said that, I personally feel that it is essential to slowly and rather quickly get this lockdown to a level where people can start earning their daily wages. I think that what the entire guidelines have missed out on from the central government are the daily wage earners. Like, for example, they have said auto rickshaws and e-rickshaws cannot ply, or cycle rickshaws. Now, these people have no other source of income. While the Delhi government has provided them income, there are other cities like Bombay, Mumbai, Bangalore, where there is no income for these people at all. So there is no plan of action yet for daily wage earners. Delhi state government has implemented it on its own, but there has to be something, because if we are looking at lockdown in red zones for more than 2 weeks, if 2 weeks we are red zone, then it will take another 2 weeks before we move into green. So we're talking about another month without salaries for millions of people, and that has not been addressed yet.
Okay, so we will have to see is what Preeti Menon says as far as Delhi is concerned, in conversation with the local authorities. And largely, I think that I have a feeling that that's how all the states are going to respond to this, despite the fact that the centre has allowed it. Let me actually first up quickly go across to Aadil Singh Boparai also. Mr. Boparai, your reaction to the announcement that's been made. This doesn't look like a lockdown extension, simply because, yes, 2 more weeks of a lockdown, but with a lot of restriction, relaxation in the restriction, even in the red zones.
Well, Tanvi, the announcement is again reflective of a top-down approach instead of a bottom-up approach. That's point number one. Point number two, something which the guidelines and Mr. Verma's opening statement misses out, is that the green zone only accounts for approximately 19% of the economic activity in this country, and about 6% of the credit goes towards the green zone. So therefore, the major chunk or the major segment of economic activity in this country is taking place in the red zone and the orange zone. So therefore, we can't lose fact to this, because saving livelihood is also saving lives. This is point number two. Point number three, when you come to relaxations, I have the guidelines in front of me. There is a stipulation that the SEZs and the export units will be open. Now, a critical question which comes up before me is, how will you get workers there? Because public transport is not allowed. Unless and until you have a provision for their accommodation, that means, assuming they're not staying there and they have to come from other places, you need means of transport. Now, public transport is not allowed. How do you actually get this started? Because there is a difference between making an announcement and seeing its pragmatic, on the ground delivery. That's point number three. Point number four, when you talk about the green zones, now for a district to fall from the green zone, from the red zone to the green zone, means that there should not be a fresh case for a period of 21 days. This is indeed a very strict criteria. So even assuming that this lockdown continues for another 2 weeks, which it will now, how many districts will fall from the red zone to the green zone? Therefore, keeping all these factors in mind, like Mr. Rahul Gandhi ji and the Congress party have been advocating, we need a fiscal injection, a comprehensive fiscal injection. The SME sector is on the brink of a collapse. There are businesses in this country which are already on the verge of insolvency. If there is no fiscal stimulus in the next 1 week, rest assured, we are facing a catastrophe. The government is not taking this seriously. They're being tardy.
Fair enough. No, Aadil Boparai, I will have a conversation, and Mr. Boparai, we've had a series of conversation. Every day we've been doing special programming, Mr. Boparai. Every day we've been doing special programming and a series of conversations about the India Revival Mission. And I agree with you, a lot has to be done on that front. But tonight, let's not make this about that, please. Tonight, let's talk about the announcement that has
But
come
Tanvi,
right
both
now
stages go
about
hand
how
in hand.
life will
You
be
can't
post
see
May
one
3rd
in
in terms of
isolation.
rules.
These
Now,
are
I know what you're
mutually
saying.
exclusive. That's my
I can hear what you're saying, Mr. Boparai. I have a question for you. I hear what you're saying, and I can hear the criticism that you've raised. But if I see the government in Maharashtra, part of which is Congress, if I see what the government in Rajasthan is saying, if I see what the government in Punjab, run by Captain Amrinder Singh, is saying, well, they're not even giving this much relief. Captain Amrinder Singh has already decided that the lockdown as is will continue for 2 more weeks. So I'm not understanding how is it that you as a representative of a Congress party is raising these critical issues, but the states where Congress is ruling and governing, the rules are completely different. You're not allowing any kind of activity.
I'm glad, Tanvi, that you've put this question to me. All Congress chief ministers have consistently said that we need more central assistance. Since you raised Punjab, which is my home state, let me tell you the total dispersal of funds from the central government to Punjab since the COVID has broken out is a meager 71 crores. A state which has a population of over 2.5 crores has been given 71 crores by the government of India. How do you expect us to release funds? And where do we get the funds from? What is the source of revenue for a state? It is excise. It is VAT from diesel and petrol. This is the major chunk where we generate our revenues. We have no funds. The state has no funds. GST area, since you've been discussing the economy, and I'm certain that you must have raised this with the central government representatives, what is the dispersal of the GST backlog? So these are real issues. And like I again say, you can't see them in isolation. The health parameters, the health issues must go hand in hand with an economic stimulus. There is a dilemma before the government. If we have to battle corona, at the same time there are joblessness issues. Unemployment has crossed 20%. So the government must pay heed to this. We are giving constructive criticism, Tanvi, don't get me wrong, but livelihoods also matter. We can't drive people towards hunger and malnutrition.
Okay, I need to go to two of our experts who are with us this evening to help us decode this better. But quick reaction from Mr. Sudesh Verma on what the Congress party has raised. Mr. Verma?
Tanvi, first of all, I really welcome Aadil after a long time. I am seeing him on debate. It's good to hear him once again, his voice on television. And what he's saying is, to some extent correct also. But all the state governments have been taken into confidence. It's not that the central government is acting on its own and the state is not taken into confidence. You see, the dose of 1,70,000 crore that has been given, it benefits Punjab also as it benefits other states, depending on the number of people who fall in that line. And talking of stimulus and all, be sure the government is aware of the economic situation. It's good that you are advising. Your advice will also be taken into confidence. But today, we are discussing the lockdown, whether the process is correct or not. Nobody has a better process in place. Otherwise, you tell us, we'll do that, because it's not sitting on ego. It's not politics. Or you or us or anybody, everybody is thinking about saving lives of people. Economy, of course, has to be saved as well, but not at the cost of life. But that would also take place. 15 days is not a huge, time. We have already passed 40 days. It's just 14 days more, and I'm sure that we'll be able to do that. Thankfully, more red zones will convert into orange and green. This is what our hope is, and people will maintain social distancing. We have to watch also, because Ramjan period is on. People are coming on the street buying things and all that. So we'll have to take all these into consideration when we are talking about how lockdown is going to actually fan out in coming days, how people are going to react to that.
Okay, let me go across to Professor Santosh Mehrotra. Professor Mehrotra, there is a merit to the point that Aadil was raising about the activities that have been allowed even in the red zones. Now, unless and until your workers are staying in the same campus, allowing industrial activity or manufacturing activity, and even private offices to open up with 33% strength, is not going to help if we don't allow public transport and movement of people, enable the movement of people. What's your own sense of the new, guidelines that have been announced?
Well, first of all, they're a great improvement on anything that we've had in the last 35 days. Because after all, the first announcement was made at 4 hours notice with precious little planning at all. And we got the first notification of a decent kind from the Ministry of Home Affairs only 3 weeks later on the 15th of April, which should have actually come a full 20 days earlier than that. Anyway, be that as it may, we now have a certain relaxation. And I think what needs to be understood in the light of the question that you've asked, Tanvi, is the following, which has so far not been brought out. Less than 20 districts account for about 60% of all COVID cases in the whole country. The country has over 700 districts. So under 20 districts account for 60% of the cases. So in other words, the red zones will be mostly located within these 20 districts. In addition, there is a certain concentration of COVID cases in certain states: Gujarat, Maharashtra, Kerala, and Delhi. Now, what is interesting is that even in these states, there are areas of concentration. So let me give you some numbers here. In Maharashtra, Mumbai accounts for 33% of the cases, and Gujarat, 66% of the cases are accounted for by Ahmedabad. In Madhya Pradesh, 50% of the cases are in Indore, and in Hyderabad, 56% of Telangana cases are located. In other words, the argument I'm making from this is that a very significant part of the country is likely to be in the orange and the green zones. The red zones hopefully will be concentrated. Of course, even within these major cities that I have mentioned, there are going to be some areas which are orange and some possibly green, though it's difficult to assess from now. We don't have a map of the country to say that. You ask the right question: how do we get workers across these borders? That doesn't, my very quick reading, I have to say that the guidelines came literally, the MHA guidelines came out literally half an hour before your show started. So I had barely finished reading it when your show started. I haven't understood whether there is any provision for the very important question that you've asked for as to how public transport will be allowed across zones within a district. This is quite apart from the fact that hundreds of thousands of workers, unfortunately, poor migrant workers, were not allowed to go back. They had to either cycle back. You are showing a visual right now as I speak, or most of them actually walked back. The result of that gross underplanning was that on the 9th of April, the number of migrant workers who died on their way home was larger than the COVID deaths in the whole country. So one is hopeful that the kind of calibration that one is seeing from the MHA in these guidelines will be further calibrated and will be passed on to the administration. The people on the ground in the last mile have to understand what the damn rule is. Otherwise, you will still have, corrupt and incompetent and callous policemen thoroughly bashing up ordinary migrant workers.
No, I take your point there, and it's not just about movement between two different zones. Within the zone as well, if there is no public transport in a red zone, how will the workers get to their office is also an interesting point. In green zones, at least, the government has said that 50% of the public transport in terms of buses can function, 50% of the bus depot capacity can also function. So that will be interesting to see. I just want to also bring to the attention of our viewers what some of our experts have highlighted earlier, and I just want to go through that list. This morning is when the central government came out with a list with the zones. Now they have said that the red zone, orange zone and green zone that have been classified right now will be revised every week. So today your city may be in as a red zone, but if everything goes well, it is quite possible that next week or in 2 weeks you will be reclassified into an orange zone basis how the numbers go. But if you look at the big cities almost every state capital and almost every big metro city of our country is currently in a red zone. I think the only exception to that is perhaps Gurugram, that's in orange zone. But Delhi, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Chennai, Pune, Ahmedabad, Bhopal, Indore, Raipur, Calcutta, all of Patna, all of these cities are all red zones. And these cities contribute a large amount to your business and economic activity. So what has been announced today will actually come as a bit of a relief. Now, of course, it's dependent on individual states and local administrations to decide on to what extent can all of this be implemented and how they are going to go about it. At no point does any government want to take the risk of going overboard and then seeing that suddenly you're seeing a spike in cases. But the point I was trying to make, that even the cities like Chandigarh right now are in the red zone. The biggest of the cities of the country are in the red zone, which is where the focus will be in terms of fighting this battle. Now, if I can just actually go across to Professor Ganguly, former DG of ICMR, joining us right now. Professor Ganguly, your response to the relaxations that have now been announced for life after May 3rd.
Actually, Tanvi, the criteria of relaxation which we have taken is much strict, much better, and in a much better than the New York relaxation, South Korea relaxation, Spain relaxation, and Italian relaxation. So we have a criteria, and this criteria is very good. When New York is relaxing and other are relaxed in the United States, we are relaxing when we are in a much better position. Our mapping has also been very good. Only problem is that what do we do when we relax scientifically? I am a scientist and I will give you some scientific solutions. If you really see here, the main thing will be, which other countries have done, tracking and testing and isolation with the relaxation. Then you can give much more relaxation than what we have given today. Tracking, there are apps. India also has an app. The China has used an app, as well as South Korea has used an app. There are some concerns about infringing on the privacy, but ultimately apps could really track people and the people feed on information in which they can be reached. We could reach a test to them and isolate it. If we do this, we will come out a winner out of this. There is also a Bloomberg method of doing it. What Mr. Bloomberg has done, that he got 30,000 people in New York trained by John Hopkins, and they had to pass an examination. These 30,000 people will be put on the tracking. There is another tracking method which Apple is developing. So there are a lot of scientific applications which are there in which we could do this kind of a thing. Testing will be a challenge. We need to have much more testing kits, easy testing kits, and this has to be done. The results must come out within maximum 1 or 2 days. If the results come late, we will not be able to track contacts, and there will be a disaster. So ultimately, we have to create a method of not only testing quickly and report coming up quickly, so that we can easily trace the contacts and isolate them, and even if necessary treat them. So if we do this, then we will be able to do much more has happened when they have relaxed. Like
well, we seem to have a bit of a trouble with Mr. Ganguly's network there, and we're unable to hear him. But I'm going to thank him at this point of time. Thank you so much. Okay, he's back, I believe. Go ahead, please. Finish your point.
So what I was
Unfortunately, we are still not able to hear him at all. So let me just go back to Preeti Menon on the the larger point that he even Mr. Ganguly was making about how we continue with the strategy of targeting, isolating, and quarantining. Preeti Menon, while we do that, and you will still have those strict restrictions for the hotspots and containment zones, is there space even within the city of Delhi, within these 11 districts, to allow some amount of movement?
I think we'll have to wait and watch. What we have seen is that when we identify containment zones and we take all the precautions that like the Delhi government has put in place, they actually become corona free. We've had a number of success stories where we have come out on the other side in 2 weeks' time, where the area is actually free of any single new case. If that happens, then we can actually look at areas where there can be more relaxations. And I would still urge the central government to think about local public transport of some sort being made available, like the other gentleman said, that if people have, you said yourself, if people have to travel to work, and if you have to open standalone shops, or if you have to open some minor construction activities, how will people commute? They can't walk all the way. So I think more clarity will be required and there will be more relaxations. But I think the next 2 weeks for Delhi and other metros like Delhi are not going to see too much relaxation. It'll have to take some more time.
Okay, let me see if I can also go across to Mr. Nawab Malik, joining us right now from Maharashtra, to give us a sense of what the government here is thinking about basis these new set of announcements. Mr. Nawab Malik, Maharashtra is one of those states with the highest number of cases. Mumbai, the city with the highest number of cases. How are you viewing the new guidelines, the relaxations that have been announced, even for the red zones? Can they be implemented in a city like Mumbai?
What the guideline has been issued by the MHA today, definitely it will be implemented in the state of Maharashtra, but a fresh guideline will be given by the state of Maharashtra. Definitely, we have to break the chain of coronavirus. City like Mumbai or MMR region, Thane, Pune, these are most affected areas where we have to take more precaution. In district places, in rural areas, some relaxation has been already given. Some more relaxation will be given to the district. But where the red zone is there, where the cases are increasing, definitely will be going to finalize different guidelines for that areas tomorrow.
But no, so what I want to understand is, for example, so far even the central government had allowed more of economic and business activity in green zones and some of it in orange zones. Today the central government is saying even in the red zones, in your industrial districts and special economic zones, for your manufacturing facilities, for essential goods, you can work. Even in red zones, 33% of working strength in private offices can go to office. And similarly for government office. Is that something that you believe is possible in the big cities of Maharashtra, which are red zones?
See, city like Mumbai or city like Pune or Pimpri or Chinchwad, we have to take more precaution. What the guideline has been given by the central government, definitely we will examine tomorrow. High level committee is there, they will sit together and we have to see how we have to go ahead. As industries are concerned, some guideline has been issued to the many of the industry, whether construction activities can be allowed or not. Today, as a Guardian Minister of Parvani, I had taken yesterday meeting and we had allowed all construction activities of the government organization, municipal corporation or PWD, irrigation department and TGS, all these activities has been allowed in districts. But Mumbai is very much concerned area. Pune city is very much concerned about that 2 or 3 areas where more cases are there. So definitely tomorrow high level committee will sit and set up a new guideline and then we will issue the guideline from 4th of May, what will be allowed, what will be not allowed. The guideline will be issued tomorrow.
Okay, and Mr. Nawab Malik, as far as the green zones are concerned, are you able, are you convinced that we can start a lot more of activity, including, bus transport with 50% seating capacity and shops being opened, even in Maharashtra? Is that possible?
The economic activities have to be restarted. The biggest challenge is that now migration is allowed from one district, one city to another city, one state to another state. A huge migration will be there in the country. And how many people are coming from different districts? Suppose a family, a group from the Mumbai city will migrate to the green zone. We have to monitor them also. How we will keep quarantine zones have to be made, quarantine areas should be to be made, and the migration of the people from one area to other area is the biggest challenge. I think more than 20 lakh people from UP, Bihar, Jharkhand are ready to go back to their hometown, home villages. Now, definitely they have challenges. Same challenge we have from
Yeah.
Parvani district. People are stuck
Yes.
in Surat, people are stuck in Tamil Nadu, people are stuck in Pune, people are stuck in Mumbai. Mumbai, we have to allow them to go their home villages. So monitoring this migration is the biggest challenge we have to understand.
All right, Mr. Nawab Malik, thank you for so much for joining us and responding to what's happened today and how that might pan out. So the state of Maharashtra very clearly is going to study the guidelines and then decide what is the best for Maharashtra. That's exactly what even Delhi has told us. So here are two examples and two of the worst hit regions of our country saying that despite the fact that the central government has issued these set of guidelines and relaxation even for the red zones, we need to see what we have to do. For example, in Maharashtra, we need to be cautious for Mumbai and Pune before we start opening up. So individually, the state government may take a decision. Let me actually go back to Mr. Boparai. Mr. Boparai, that's essentially what we will see. That even though the center has issued these guidelines, the individual states are actually going to take a call on whether or not they want to risk opening up the cities and the towns right now.
Well, certainly, Tanvi, it's the state government which is the frontline responder, since public health comes under the state list. And under the Disaster Management Act, a certain degree of leeway is given to the states to modify and perhaps bring it a notch lower or take it a notch higher, depending upon the seriousness and the severity of the infection transmission. As far as the guidelines which have been announced today are concerned, the Congress ruled states will implement the guidelines. Of course, a certain degree of modification will depend, will be issued depending on a case-by-case basis. But coming back to my primary point, our policy prescription right from the starting has been that number one, aggressively ramp up testing, because there is no other way of really containing this disease, containing this infection, because there is no vaccine yet, number one. Number two, augment health infrastructure. This is something where we need central assistance. We need funds from the central government. There is a PM CARES fund which has been started. We need dispersal of that money. Number three, like Mr. Nawab Malik said, economic activity cannot remain suspended till eternity. Sooner than later, we have to revive economic activity, because livelihood, starvation, these are challenges which are facing us, and these are real challenges. I'm not exaggerating the extent of the catastrophe which is before us, but we really need to start working on this. And as far as discount is concerned, the central government needs to put in more money. They need to start disbursing funds. They need to start releasing GST areas, because the state governments do not have the resources. I'm being very honest. All state governments, not just Congress ruled states, even BJP ruled states, there is paucity of funds. The central government must step in. For example, now let's take the example of Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh, the testing is abysmally low. They need to ramp up testing. The only way to really get the better of this disease is by testing, isolating, containing, and then treating somebody. So these are issues. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Tanvi?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Tanvi, can you? Yes. So therefore, aggressive testing with release of funds, this is what the central government needs to do. And the Prime Minister must, get started with this. Enough of Mann Ki Baats, enough of announcements. There is need for action. This is critical time. If we don't act now, we'll perhaps be backed by more than a decade when it comes to the economic activity, if not more.
Okay, before I get Sudesh Sharma to respond to that, let me ask Professor Mehrotra if he wants to add to this. Professor Mehrotra, and I've been having a series of conversations with various industry representatives as well, and they all now seem to suggest that it's time for government to also ramp up on the announcements for relief measures as we look at restarting some amount of economic activity. Do you think it is high time, and if yes, what should be the immediate priority in terms of announcements? Yes, help for MSMEs, but what else should be the central government's priority?
I think there has to be a massive package, at least of the order of 3 to 4% of GDP. We are talking about something like 6 to 8 trillion rupees or 6 to 8 lakh crores. And I don't think we are seeing that. All we got was a relief package of welfare measures which have been implemented rather weakly. And a survey told us of 11,000 migrant workers that majority of them had not received either cash or grains. So what we need is an economic recovery package as we now begin to open up the economy. So there's a financing for MSMEs. We've already sent a series of suggestions to the government on the micro, small, medium enterprises. Now, the Mudra the Mudra loan scheme has to be supplemented, for instance, with working capital loans. Currently, we are expecting MSMEs to pay their wages. How are they supposed to pay their wages if they have very little working capital? MSMEs are always short of funds.
Correct.
And NBFCs are not lending to them because NBFCs themselves had gotten into trouble on account of poor regulation by the RBI and the government. So we clearly have to move very quickly on banking reform, very quickly, which is all rather easily done if thought through carefully. So, there are so many measures that one could talk about. This is not the program. You have to think of a separate program.
Yes.
And by the way,
we've been having those, and we will have a lot more and invite you on those as well. Because India Revival Mission needs to be the priority right now. Livelihoods matter as much as saving lives now.
Let me just
yes,
say something.
Please go ahead.
Let me just say something about tracking people. With all due respect to Professor Ganguly, the retired DG of the ICMR, I think there seems to be some misconception among the elite in our country that the majority of our countrymen have smartphones. An app works on a smartphone. It doesn't work on a non-smartphone. The total number of smartphones in the country in a population of 1.3 billion does not exceed 400 million. What does that mean? And do you think the poor have smartphones? The poor don't have smartphones. And it's the poor who are the most vulnerable to this disease. You and I can engage in physical distancing and wash our hands, etc. They cannot. So what has to happen is what Kerala is doing, which is what? There isn't physical distancing, but social solidarity with the poor. There is social solidarity with the migrant workers. There is contact tracing by the public health system, a functioning public health system which is being managed and run by the Panchayati Raj organization. Delhi government has been very successful in creating Mohalla clinics. So Mohalla clinics obviously are reasonably well staffed. We are hoping that the Delhi government is using its Mohalla clinics to do the same kind of contact tracing on a human basis, not an app-based basis, that Kerala is attempting to do.
Yes. Well, almost all states, unfortunately, even those who are planning to send the migrants back home, their first reaction was to start an online registration portal for migrants who are seeking some kind of help to go back home. Now, while it sounds like you're doing something, it's honestly not going to be very practical until you send somebody on ground to the relief camps and the shelter camps, and then they ask these same migrants whether they want to go home and where do they want, and if they need to give their details. So I see the point that you're making, Professor Mehrotra, on a larger basis. So there, Sharma, would you want to respond to some of the issues that have been raised, especially on the economic front? Yes, lockdown 3.0 is good. You've brought in a set of relaxations, but now it's also time to look at helping the industry in restarting the economy.
There's no doubt about that, and whatever suggestions people are giving, experts are giving, the government is seized of that, the government is considering that, and all these things will be taken into account because our aspirations, our goals are the same. There is no contradiction in that. So I would rather wait for a full-fledged debate on this, because I cannot specify the quantum, which is the worry of people, that what is the quantum government is going to announce. Government will definitely announce a huge quantum, but I cannot specify because I do not know, and even if I know, I could not be able to give a hint also. But now coming to the basic point that you see where we have gone right, where the US did not go right. You see, US opened up, 56,000 people have died, and now they are taking precaution. They have the best kind of medical system, and you compare with India, then we went with a lockdown, created a system where now we can say that we can deal with COVID cases. You see, people are not coming out, even if they are suffering from COVID. You come to know about this, so somebody has died, because you cannot hide it. Because most of the deaths will happen in a hospital. Because when the respiratory system collapses, then you have to go on ventilator. People die. Then you come to know that who are the people they could have come in contact with, and then you quarantine them. This is how it is happening. Rapid testing is not the way this country can go. Such a huge population. There will be lots of allegations why you are doing to this people, why you are not doing to this people. So the best way, if no COVID cases come, if the death goes down, then you can assume that yes, the cases are petering down. We are narrowing the curve, and the country is fully prepared now. We have the PPEs, we have masks, we have all the medical system, we have ICU units, we have mobile ICU vans, everything is in place now. So there's nothing to worry about that. Hopefully after 14 days we would be able to see the light, and things will come back to normal. But yes, let's not rush also, because you see, only those people who actually were in need of this emergency kind of opening up will go to the offices, look into their accounts, do the stock taking, which were essential. So it can happen with less number of labor force, so 33%, and those who can afford it still, they can continue with this 14 days lockdown, taking it more seriously. But unless it is urgent, why would one venture out? That's the whole point. And it's just a model type that has been given by central government, as rightly pointed out, by various state governments. They will incorporate their own things. They will either implement in toto, or they will add a few things there. So they are free to do that, because state government has to look into their own resources as well. But the model type has been given, and central government is what? All the state governments together. Otherwise there is no territory that central government controls, the entire India. But it has to be done through state governments, isn't it? So we hope that it will be taken in the right spirit, and people would follow it. There will be no politics over this. If they have some genuine suggestions, they can of course come to the Prime Minister. He is always open to talk to anyone. He is talking to every expert. So they are welcome to do that.
Well, let me also say good evening to panelists who are joining us right now. Professor Garga Chatterjee joining us, and I've also got Dr. Kaushik Lahiri, Vice President of the West Bengal Doctors Forum, with us right now. Garga Chatterjee, the new set of announcements have come, bringing significant relief even in red zones, not just the green and orange zones.
All over the world, especially, and we should refer to the South African example, where after a 5-week lockdown, there has been relaxation. The problem lies, if you look at a certain wording of the Ministry of Home Affairs directive, is that it says that this is unchangeable. You can only make it stricter, but you cannot make it lenient. It just so happens, and that has always been true, that local field intelligence and understanding about a state, let's say understanding about West Bengal or understanding about Orissa, is best in West Bengal or in Orissa, not in Delhi, right? So at the end of the day, for a state's economy to function well, and at the same time taking into account that the corona expansion doesn't happen, this is a question. When we have a model guideline, one could have said, okay, we need these classifications, which are worldwide classifications, frankly. But at the same time, the fact that a state cannot tailor it based on its reality, in a sense, it can do it only one way but not the other, is quite unfortunate. Unfortunate because at this point of time, various states, especially various states, I will not get into the party politics of it, owe a huge amount of money from the center. Even in usual times, just to balance the books and keep a state running, every state needs money, and the money is not something that the center kind of gives out as alms or doles, right? It is, the whole federal system is based on states do have their money, and we have a center to do some coordinating jobs, and that has its own money. But the fact is, if they keep on holding with money, we have diarchy, which means on the ground, the state governments at this point is the effective government on the ground. Wherever you are living, wherever I'm living, wherever everyone is living, it's the state government running the show, right? However, the one holding the resources is not the government on the ground. Now, that is a huge problem, which is why at this point of time, a huge amount of GDP, okay, is being held, or a huge amount of budgetary allocation is being held by the center, which in this extreme once in a century emergency has to be disbursed to states. We have an abysmally low, let's say, investment in health and various other things. We need at least a 10% of the budgetary allocation to be added on to what is the financial devolution to states, because
No,
that's where India lives.
okay. That's fair enough. You can ask for that, and we can have a conversation about it any day. But tonight I'm asking you about the new set of guidelines that have come in. And I understand when you say that the state also needs to have a role. I have spoken to representatives of two other states right now who both are extremely cautious in even bringing in these relaxation. You, on the other hand, Mr. Garga Chatterjee, seem to be suggesting that the West Bengal government or TMC would want more of relaxation than what's being announced?
I am not talking about any particular state. What I'm saying is whether it needs to be relaxed more or needs to be more stringent is a decision that should completely lie with the state government, because at the end of the day, people will die here or people will live here. Either way, right?
Well, if it
There
needs
is
to
no
be more stringent, that decision is left to every state government.
Yeah, it's a one-sided one, right?
So if you're talking about saving lives, that decision is with the state governments.
When the economy falters due to joblessness and lack of various amenities of life and resources, COVID is not the only cause of death in the Indian Union of, 130 million people. We must remember this, 1.3 billion people. So every death is a death. It's not as if a corona death is worth more than a non-corona death. No other disease, no other causes of usual deaths and well-being and non-well-being have stopped because just there is corona, and we cannot exacerbate it. It's not relaxation versus death. It's death versus death. Okay.
Okay, let me actually also bring in Dr. Lahiri and ask him this question. Dr. Lahiri, do you believe that a reasonable set of relaxation order has come in place, or do you think this is going overboard in terms of relaxation, keeping in mind the current situation in many states? Let's be honest, right now there are a significant number of red zones. The cases are on the rise. In fact, in Kerala, where we had some green zones till last week, they have now reported fresh cases, and we are seeing a rise there as well. So some amount of caution has to be shown.
Actually, you need to understand this is an unprecedented situation. We all
yes,
know
go ahead.
We all unprecedented situation, and yeah, relaxation and there's no formula, and this virus is just 4 months old. So we are not sure that this is the correct path or not. So we are just following whatever WHO. But as a physician, really regarding a few things, that there's some dichotomy of like data regarding the state. This should not happen. And what is lockdown that we need to understand? As a medical person, our like aim will be to test more tests to isolate, to treat and trace. So whether this is happening in real time, and there should not be any lack of transparency regarding the facts and figures. This has been reflected worldwide. So these are the things.
Unfortunately, Dr. Lahiri, we have a really bad line with you. Unfortunately, Dr. Lahiri, we have a really bad line with you, and I'm barely able to understand what you're saying right now. My apologies for not being able to, have a proper conversation. I'm going to thank all of our panelists for joining us right now, and we're just going to take a short break because there's lots more on the other side. Suffice to say, viewers, we were expecting this announcement to come sometime between today and the weekend because on May 3rd, the current lockdown period comes to an end. The government has now come out with a set of rules and guidelines for what happens to life post May 4th for at least the next 2 weeks. In a sense, it's a fresh lockdown order, but difficult to call it lockdown extension because it's not the same as what we are seeing right now or what we've seen in the past 5 weeks. There are some relaxations that the central government has given the space for, but it now depends on state governments, on district administration, whether they believe those set of guidelines can be implemented or they need to be a lot more precautious and continue with the kind of clampdown that we've seen so far. We're going to decode every single bit of it for you. Lots more experts on the other side and big reactions lined up. Stay with me here on the Urban Debate.